On a clear day. What is a clear day except when my thoughts are clear? Not about nice weather. It's about when my thoughts are clear so that I can think true thoughts. I can think real thoughts instead of the story I've made up. Today's talk is called The Only Way to Achieve Prosperity. The only way to achieve prosperity. And it comes from an Eric Butterworth quote. And if you don't know who Eric Butterworth was, his body's no longer here, but he lives on as an icon in the Unity movement. He wrote a best-selling book called Discover the Power Within You, which is our theme here at Unity Center. And that's the book that got him on Oprah. Isn't that impressive? But Eric was a wonderful teacher. He was so clear. But this one quote that I just so liked, there is only one way which you can achieve prosperity, and that is by taking charge of your mind. So you see, it doesn't happen through luck. It really doesn't happen through the generosity of others, even though it's always good to thank someone. Good manners. But it's by taking charge of your mind. Because you can see, if you were to notice, you can be given all the money in the world. And if you haven't taken charge of your mind, you've got to get rid of it. You've got to give it away. You've got to throw it away. You've got to burn it. You've got to do something with it so that you can go back to maintain the poor consciousness. Now, prosperity certainly isn't about money, but it sure does include it. We live, at this point in our society, we live in an exchange, a financial exchange mentality. And so the New Thought movement, many years ago, began to work with two very important parts of our living. One is your health, and the other is your finances. At one time, you could not graduate to become an ordained Unity minister unless you had had an overcoming of both. Because how could you pass along the information if you didn't have personal experience with the overcoming of a health challenge or a financial challenge? You know, where at one point you had been unconscious, unaware. As Myrtle Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, said, owing to a lack of understanding of the health laws, neither of us was as healthy as we ought to have been. And many of us, owing to a lack of understanding of the wealth laws, are not as wealthy as we ought to be. I fully believe there is enough for everyone on this planet. Enough good, whatever that good happens to be. Because you see, our wealth isn't based on how many numbers can be tabulated in your bank account or in your wallet. That's not what your wealth is counted on. Your wealth is about how much how in charge are you of your mind? How in charge of your mind are you? Or are you letting everybody else make your decisions for you? Are you letting the world tell you what you ought to be thinking? Are you letting the news tell you what you ought to be thinking? Are you letting this tell you what you ought to be thinking? Are you, not this, but the amount of this, how many it adds up to, telling you what you ought to be thinking? Are you letting the floor or the sky, the weather, tell you what you ought to be thinking? Are you letting your past tell you what you ought to be thinking? And I'll say yes to that one. We're all letting our past tell us what we ought to be thinking. And you know what? There are days our past is just wrong. Some days our past is really mistaken. And we ought not to be listening to it. Because our past, well, let's face it, sometimes our past is just a liar. Our past tells us we're in danger when we're not in any danger today. We're not in any danger today. Sometimes our past will tell us we're sick today, and we're not. And sometimes our past will tell us we're poor today, and we're not. Sometimes our past will tell us someone doesn't like us, and that's not at all the case. The only way to achieve prosperity is to take charge of your mind. Are you in charge of what you think about money? Are you in charge of what you think about your body? Are you in charge of what you think about me? Are you in charge of what you think about the person next to you? Are you in charge of what you think about your spouse? Or your former spouse? Or should I like to say the one before that? Are you in charge of what to think about our water, our food? Are you in charge of what to think about the food that is in front of you when you sit down to eat? Are you in charge? Is your mind in charge? Or is somebody else's mind? Back when I was doing my radio show, I had a nutritionist on. And I told her in advance, I said, I don't want you on here to scare people. I don't want to hear I have to eat kale because I should be afraid of a Snickers bar. And you laugh at that, but there's a lot of health people, spiritual people, who their tactic is to scare you into submitting to your health, into your wealth, into your well-being, to scare you. You know, if you don't do this, you're going to be poor. I don't want to scare anybody into prosperity. I want to encourage us all into a prosperity consciousness. We're really a spiritual school to teach practical spirituality, which means it is practicable. That I could practice everything that is said on Sunday morning, that is said in a class here, that I could practice it every day of my life. That's our function here, is to make it practicable, not just a nice idea. Not just something so that I can feel a little less hateful towards myself. I don't want to climb these steps on a Sunday morning just to hate myself less. Do you? Shouldn't you have a higher goal than hating yourself less? Oughtn't you? You know, owing to a lack of understanding of the love laws, I hated myself more than I should have. I mean, that's really, and we don't have to do that. I want to read a couple of things to you here because they interest me. I'll read to you Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder's definition of prosperity. The consciousness of God as the abundant, everywhere present resource, unfailing, ready for all who open themselves to it through faith. And he quotes Psalms 34:10, and he says, "They that seek," and he says, "Jehovah shall not want any good thing." Now, what if we change Jehovah to the law? Those that seek the law will not want for any good thing. Those that seek principle will not want for any good thing. If you look at it that way, it makes it not nearly so religious, but it makes it possible. Today I desire divine law. Today I desire divine principle, active and present in my mind and in my life, in my relationships, in my wallet, in my body. Today I desire the practice of divine principle. And let me tell you what divine principle is. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. That is a principle. So if you notice your thoughts, you can, and you don't want this one multiplied, interrupt it. Interrupt it at any cost. You may have to fall to your knees because you don't know what to think at this moment. It hurts so much to not think of this awful thought, to interrupt this painful thought. But I'm going to do it anyway because it's not in alignment with how I want to live. I want to think the thoughts that put me in alignment with how I want to live. I think we can do better than fearing getting up in the morning, than fearing running out of money, than fearing that one day we're going to get sick and die. And for some of us, we think it's today. The old Henny Youngman joke. I have enough money to live for the rest of my life as long as I die by 4 o'clock this afternoon. Okay. So I'm going to read from John 3, from the Yellow Book. But I wanted to read just this little piece, because they really don't go together. The passage in the Bible with the regular Bible and that really don't correlate. But there's one little couple of sentences here I liked. And it's John 3, there's only one chapter in it. It's verse 11 that says, "Beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. He who does good is of God, and he who does evil has not seen God." And the reason I like that is it doesn't say it's not of God. It just says he has not seen God. And what is evil but missing the mark? It is our confusion. He who lives in confusion, who keeps telling himself the same old story that is not true, has not seen God, has not seen love, has not seen peace, has not seen joy, has not desired principle more than desired the opposite. So you see, I like finding passages that don't tell me that there's an absence of God, but merely that I have not noticed. There's not an absence of good, I've just not noticed the good. There's not an absence of light, I just have not noticed the light. I haven't seen it because I'm busy seeing something that is not real, that is not true. And I don't know about you, I can become very infatuated with my story. The story that's not true about myself. You know, you look in the mirror and say, oh, I weigh this much, I weigh this, and it means this, and it means this, and it means this. Doesn't mean any of that. I am a beloved child of God. I am good. For sale in our bookstore. $1 a piece. So, actually it wasn't John I was going to read here, it was Corinthians. So 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Yeah, the John in here I didn't like it so much. So verse 6 through 9 says, "Whoever sows sparingly shall also reap sparingly. And whoever sows generously shall also reap generously. This means that what you give, you experience." And that's in every category of your life. It's not just money. It's spirit. What are you giving in spirit? What are you giving in money? What are you giving in life, in love, in truth, and wisdom? What are you giving? Are you giving consciously or are you giving unconsciously? Are you giving joyously? Are you giving fearfully? You know, even to let someone in traffic, how are you doing it? With what attitude are you doing it? Eric Butterworth always used to say, wave them through and watch them smile. I talked about this a couple weeks ago, that we must leave the competitive world and enter into the creative one. We must exit the competitive world. We must come to terms that we're not competing with each other. And the best way I know to start that is on the highway. I'm not in competition with other drivers. I am not. And they're not in competition with me. And you don't know what they're thinking, so don't decide. You're not in the car with them. You have not asked them. Don't decide what their intentions are. If they're bearing down on you, if they're whatever, you don't know. You don't know what's going on in their mind or their lives. Are you ready to love them now? Are you ready to create a loving relationship with these anonymous people in these cars on this highway? I know, it's something, isn't it? It's a great way to start practicing this stuff. It's a fantastic way. Last night we were on the train. Coming home, we took the train in because I thought it would be less stressful than driving. Getting in the theater rush hour, coming home the theater rush hour. Because we were having an 8 o'clock dinner. Lucy and Larry said hi. They go away. But on the way home, we got the car with the drunks. The loud ones. And he and I were like in our own little room on the train. There's this one little section on the Metro North that is really quite wonderful. It's a little crowded, but you really feel like but it's not soundproof. And this group behind us were having the best time. And for some reason, I decided, well, it was irksome. I didn't hear any violence. I heard no unkindness. I just heard a bunch of loud drunks. And not one of my first, but one of my thoughts was, I said to David, I'm going to pretend and assume I never sounded like that. I have got to hope that I never felt that everything that was on my mind had to be expressed at top volume. while everybody else was expressing everything they think at top volume. There was no exchange. So, but on this, I knew I could take charge of my mind. And I was really impressed that I decided I don't feel like being mad at these people. I don't feel like accusing them of taking up my space. It was 10:30 on a Saturday night coming from New York City on a warm, beautiful weekend. And I'm out in public. And you know what? There's all kinds of people in public. And they're not, as long as they're not hurting me, that there's no malice intended, am I here to say you're wrong for having a good time? Am I here to say that? Years ago I did say that once to somebody. There was this girl, I was having a hard time, and I was late on a train coming back to New York from somewhere, and there's a group of college kids on there, and they were having a good time. And we got to one stop, and this young girl, everybody left but this one girl, and her phone rang at that time. And she and I were the only ones left in the car, and she's at full volume, I can talk now, because I'm alone. And I leaned over her seat, and I said, no, you're not. So I have to go, some guy's yelling at me. Your actions within the world are not important in themselves. They cannot be. The world is not real, and you in truth are not in the world. You are a mind experiencing yourself in a world that does not exist. But as you seem to act in the world based on your belief that you are in the world, the belief and delusion continues within the mind. You'll notice nowhere does it say you should feel guilty about this. As you sow delusion, you shall experience delusion. This is to give nothing and to experience nothing as if it is real. This is simply to dream. This is to engage in fantasy. It is nothing, although it may frighten you. It is nothing, although there was a big nothing rat on the street last night that frightened me. Nothing. Step away from your fear. I don't know if that crossing the street is what it meant by that, but be willing to see that fantasy isn't reality. See, our fears are our fantasy. If we could remind ourselves that my fears aren't real, even though I am experiencing them as if they are. That's how we begin to shift. That's how we begin to take charge of our mind. Rather than, I'm so guilty because I shouldn't have this fear, and I do. I shouldn't have this fear, and I do. But I do. I could, nowhere. I want to be very clear at this. And I hope you will put it in the God of your understanding. God never needs us, desires us, wants us, or requires us to be guilty, to be ashamed. Never, no matter what awful things we have done, God does not require us to be punished, to be ashamed, to live in any kind of guilt, ever. And so therefore, we no longer have to use guilt as a form of imagined redemption. Be very clear on this. We will not get to love through guilt. Give unto yourself by willing not to continue thoughts of non-giving. Relax into your trust in me, capital M, me, Holy Spirit. As you continue to believe in the world, act on your trust in me. This is not an action in the world, for there is no world. But this is giving, because this is telling the mind that the truth must be true. This is waking up from the dream by not participating in the belief in the dream anymore. And this last line. The mind knows its own thoughts and it reacts to them. And so the only way to achieve prosperity is to take charge of your mind. Would you desire to take charge of your mind today? Would you become accountable for every thought you think? Not so that you may have guilt, but that so you may have freedom. Would you consider that? There is no one and no thing that needs you to be guilty ever again. that needs you to be ashamed. We've made mistakes. We've missed the mark. I don't have to keep doing it just to assuage a painful feeling. Last night when I was afraid of the rat, and I said, David, I'm sorry. And he said, you don't have to apologize ever again. I thought, well, that's very nice of you. Because he knows it'll last till it doesn't. But him shaming me that I shouldn't be afraid will not get me over that faster. Will not get me over any hump. We can have shaky days, very shaky days, and they pass. We can have days that are just so easy, and they pass. We can have days where it seems like everybody is on our side, and days where it seems like everybody is against us. It's not everybody, everything. Your appliances break, you spill stuff. All sorts of stuff happens in this playground. But in your practice of practical spirituality, light bulbs go off. With a 5-minute-a-day meditation, light bulbs go off. We're reminded of things about ourselves we did not know were true, or that we had forgotten were true, or that we thought we had lost, that we were no longer allowed to participate in that good because we had so failed. But the truth is very forgiving. The truth, because it never condemns, it never judges. Truth never judges us. It's the illusion that judges us. And so I invite you all to reconsider what you're giving to yourself in thought each day. What you're giving to your neighbor in your thoughts each day. Because you are in charge. And I'm going to tell you something about your wealth. For every thought that you have of the absence of good, it affects your pocketbook. I said that last week in a prosperity class on Tuesday night. I said, it affects your money. Every thought of guilt you have, every thought of condemnation you have affects your money. It absolutely does. Is your money a spiritual practice for you, or are you on automatic with your money? Because I'm bringing up money because we're going to do our offering here in a moment. And I really want our offering here at Unity Center to be a practice of spirituality rather than a fundraising opportunity for Unity Center, as if there is you, there is me, and there's Unity Center that needs money. We can't play that game. That's a thought of lack. That's a thought of absence. Let our thoughts be, I give to where I am spiritually fed, because I wish to keep that going, because I am that place, because I am that. I am taking this quarter, this dollar, this $10, this $1 million, whatever it is that you are called to give in exchange for your spiritual food, because I would never want to limit anyone. I would never, oh, that's too much. How can you give too much? Could anyone outgive God in spirituality? And who can give who has not received? Do you know that 10% of 0 is 0? Did we consider that? 10% of 0 is 0. I teach in tenths. I teach in tithing. That's what I practice. It's easy. It's easy math. That's why I do the tenth. You give as you are called. And we've been doing the offering a little bit differently this year. I've asked in these exercises, give something. Even if you pledge here, take something out of your wallet, your purse, your whatever, and you participate in the act of giving. And you'll notice there are 2 baskets up here. This is our offering basket. Feel free to fill it up. You laugh till it hurts. This is a basket of affirmations. What I'd like everyone to do, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, is to come up here. And as you give, receive. Receive. As you give, receive. What is your name?
Rick.
I have gone blank. Nancy and Rick. I'd like you to help guide everyone. Start in the back.
Okay.
Those of you who care to participate in this giving today, to come up here. And what I ask, Kenneth's going to play under it all, that this be a sacred act for you. Let this be a sacred, meditative act for you. I'll give you our prayer, which says that divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Would you all know that prayer with me? Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And let's begin our joyous act of giving. As you put it in, say, thank you, God, or thank you to yourself. Take your affirmation and then joyously, but quietly, go back to your seat. You know, I didn't want to do fortune cookie affirmations. I wanted these to be active, action affirmations. Something that can be applied right now. A friend of mine at Unity of Pensacola, Florida, he this year began in his church doing the love offering time like this. And he founded a very practical activity. So we're going to be doing it this way. We're going to be actively involved in our church, in our participation in our church, in our giving, For you see, the only way to achieve prosperity is to take charge of my mind. The only way to achieve prosperity is to take charge of my mind. The only way to achieve prosperity is to take charge of my mind. Would you say that with me? The only way to achieve prosperity is to take charge of my mind. So it is.